Imagine just for a second that you are walking through this absolutely breathtaking ancient estate.
Oh, like a massive historic mansion.
Yeah, exactly. The architecture is just stunning. The stonework is immaculate. The gardens are incredibly lush. And the sunlight is hitting these massive stained glass windows just perfectly.
Sounds pretty ideal.
Right. It is entirely awe-inspiring. But then, as you look a little closer, you start to notice things.
The cracks in the foundation.
Exactly. The floors are warped. There's this subtle but persistent smell of rot coming from right behind the drywall.
Oh, that's never a good sign.
No, it's not. And that beautiful garden out back, it's actually choking on these invasive vines, and the big fountain in the center is cracking right down the middle.
So it's a space that was clearly designed for beauty and order, but it is actively, undeniably decaying from the inside out.
That's it exactly. That tension, that lingering sense that a world so majestic can be so fundamentally damaged is the exact premise of a fascinating document we are tearing into today.
The Infographics and Text by Chris R. Velasquez.
Right, titled The Curse Upon Creation. And welcome to today's deep dive, by the way. Our mission today is to look at the structural truth of why the world we live in is both breathtakingly beautiful and, well, deeply broken.
Which is a huge question.
It really is. This deep dive is for anyone who has ever wondered why work is so exhausting, why nature can be so harsh, and why there is this universal human sensation that something is just permanently off with the universe.
Yeah, and Velasquez builds this really comprehensive framework that argues sin isn't just an individual moral failure.
Right, like it's not just telling a lie or cheating on your taxes.
Exactly. In this theological architecture, human rebellion caused a literal cosmic fracture.
A cosmic fracture. I mean, that is a heavy phrase.
It is. And we're going to track this concept through the lens of biblical theology today. We'll map a narrative that goes from a perfect garden through a devastating curse all the way to a restored garden city.
And just to set the table for you listening right now, as we walk through this religious and theological framework, we're really just reporting on the mechanics of the perspectives laid out in the text.
Right. We aren't endorsing them as objective fact.
Exactly. We are just exploring how this specific, sweeping worldview attempts to explain the human condition and the physical state of the universe. So, okay, let's unpack this. If the world is a broken mansion now, we have to look at what the blueprints say it was supposed to look like before the cracks formed.
Well, according to Genesis 1 and 2, which really formed the bedrock of this worldview, creation was designed to be inherently good. It was ordered, abundant, and purposeful.
So no chaos.
None at all. The text presents a reality where God speaks, and reality simply forms in response. Light separates from darkness. The sea and the land are given firm boundaries.
It's all very methodical.
Very. There's no struggle for dominance among the elements. There's only a deeply intentional, harmonious order.
And right in the middle of all that pristine order, humanity is placed. The source highlights something called the cultural mandate from Genesis 1.28.
Yeah, that's a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Because the text says humanity is told to, quote, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion. And I have to be honest, I hear words like subdue and dominion, and my mind immediately goes to, clear-cutting forests.
Oh, sure. Bulldozers and smokestack factories.
Yeah, exactly. Just total exploitation.
Well, that is a really common modern reading. But Velasquez emphasizes it is a profound misunderstanding of the original Hebrew context.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This mandate is not an endorsement of exploitation at all. In this theological framework, humanity is placed within creation to function as priest kings.
Priest kings, okay.
Right. They are meant to image the Creator by cultivating, guarding, and governing the world in wisdom. They're not owners doing whatever they please.
So they answer to somebody higher.
Exactly. They're stewards accountable to the ultimate king.
But priest kings is a really heavy specific phrase. Like, a king governs and organizes, right? But a priest mediates and serves in a sacred space.
Which means humanity is supposed to be doing both simultaneously.
That's fascinating.
It is. And Genesis 2 actually describes the Garden of Eden not just as a park or a nice forest, but as a sanctuary-like space.
Like a temple.
A cosmic temple, yeah.
Yeah.
Where God's presence dwells perfectly with humanity, and the original human is tasked to work and keep the garden.
Work and keep. Sounds simple enough.
You'd think so, but the author points out that in the original Hebrew, those specific verbs, abad and shamar, are the exact same words used later in the biblical narrative.
Used for what?
to describe the sacred duties of the priests serving in the tabernacle.
Wait, really? The exact same word?
The exact same words.
Wow. So the dirt, the trees, the animals, the whole earth was meant to be a temple. And humanity's job was to care for it as a literal sacred duty.
Yes. It was a covenantal habitat. Everything functioned in perfect relational harmony.
Until we hit Genesis 3.
Right. The fall.
The source describes a serpent tempting the woman. And the author makes the point that the core issue here wasn't just like a sudden craving for a piece of forbidden fruit.
No, the fruit itself is really just the vehicle. It's the vehicle for deeper philosophical and theological treason.
Treason. That's a strong word.
Well, the text argues the temptation was fundamentally toward autonomy. The serpent asks, did God actually say?
Right. Casting that doubt.
Exactly. Introducing the concept that God might be withholding something good, that God cannot be fully trusted as the arbiter of reality.
And Velasquez writes that the core issue was enthronement.
Yes. Humanity chose mistrust over trust. They grasped for the right to define good and evil entirely on their own terms.
Completely apart from the creator. They basically wanted to sit in the big chair.
That's a great way to put it.
And the fallout from that choice, that desire for self-enthronement, is immediate. Like, the source lists these cascading consequences.
It's a rapid collapse.
It really is. Reading through them feels like looking at a psychology textbook outlining the birth of trauma.
Oh, absolutely.
First, shame enters human consciousness. Suddenly they realize they are naked, and what do? They run into the bushes to hide from God and from each other.
Because the introduction of shame represents the total collapse of vulnerability.
Right, before this, it was just total openness.
Complete naked openness. But the moment autonomy is chosen, fear just completely displaces that openness. Self-protection becomes the default human instinct.
Which we see play out instantly in the text as the relationships fracture through blame, specifically.
Yes, the man blames the woman.
And even implicitly blames God, right? He says, the woman you gave me.
Exactly. And then the woman blames the serpent. It's the literal birth of finger-pointing.
The immediate severing of human solidarity. And from there, the consequences get intensely physical.
Very physical. Childbirth becomes painful.
And work, which, like we just established, was originally a sacred, joyful calling, suddenly becomes toil.
Right. It becomes exhausting. It involves sweat and frustration.
And ultimately, biological death becomes the human destiny. You know, dust you are, and to dust you shall return.
But there is a specific pivotal line in Genesis 3 that the author hinges this entire thesis upon.
Genesis 3.17?
Yes. God says to the man, "Cursed is the ground because of you." Velasquez argues this is the sentence that basically reverberates through the entire rest of the biblical narrative.
Okay, let's go back to our analogy for a second. Think of humanity as the newly hired property managers of this pristine, multi-billion-dollar estate.
Okay, tracking with you.
Their job is to keep the gardens blooming, maintain the house, make sure the plumbing runs smoothly. But the property managers decide they want to forge the deed, overthrow the owner, and claim the estate for themselves.
Right, the treason we talked about.
Exactly. And in the process of that rebellion, they are evicted, and the estate itself falls into absolute disrepair. The pipes burst, the garden dies, the roof caves in.
Because the covenantal dynamic at play here is that the fate of the realm is permanently tied to the fate of the ruler.
Okay, but I have to push back here.
Go for it.
Wait, so a single act of eating fruit, or even one internal act of rebellion, broke the entire physical universe, like broke the soil mechanics of the planet. How does the text justify that leap?
Well, the text justifies it by establishing that the ground is not cursed because creation itself is inherently evil or because physical matter is somehow bad.
Okay.
The ground is cursed because the relationship between humanity and creation, which was supposed to be governed by God's order, was deeply disordered.
Ah, I see.
Because humanity was the appointed head and mediator of creation, right? So when the head rebelled against the ultimate king, the kingdom itself was plunged into instability.
Creation was literally drawn into humanity's revolt.
Exactly. It is a massive structural trickle-down effect.
So because the earth was entirely tied to humanity's leadership, it sank when humanity sank.
Exactly.
Which means we have to look much closer at what this curse actually is within this framework and, well, what it isn't.
Because curse is a highly loaded word.
Extremely loaded. People hear that and think of a witch with a cauldron or some kind of magic spell cast out of spite.
Right. But Velasquez is very careful to define the anatomy of the curse, to separate it from those pagan ideas of magic or like capricious divine temper tantrums.
So how does he define it?
The curse is defined as a judicial consequence of human rebellion that brings disorder, pain, and death. It is the righteous, necessary reaction of a holy God to a breached covenant.
Because if God simply ignored the treason,
Then he would not be just, and the moral fabric of the universe would essentially be meaningless.
the infographics provided in our sources break this down into a core theological principle. They say the curse is relational before it is environmental.
Yes, the ecological dimension is entirely downstream from the covenantal dimension.
Which is wild to think about. We live in a modern era where we view environmental issues, harsh weather, or agricultural failure as purely mechanical, scientific, or economic problems.
Entirely. But this biblical framework insists that the physical world is morally significant. It's not indifferent matter.
The land is described as a theological space.
A space that actively responds to human fidelity or human rebellion. When humans reject their creator, the creation becomes unstable and hostile in their hands.
It actually resists us. The text specifically mentions thorns and thistles as symbols of this frustrated vocation.
Right, because God didn't fire humanity from the property management job.
We are still stewards. We still have to build, plant, and organize.
But now our cultivation includes intense frustration, fatigue, and decay.
So what does this all mean for how we view natural disasters or even just a garden full of weeds? Is the text saying the earth is actively resisting us? Like the trees are conspiring against human progress?
Not consciously in an animistic sense, no. But structurally, yes. The text insists on a theological reality creation suffers under covenantal justice.
Meaning God's moral order is woven into the very fabric of the dew and the rain.
Exactly. When the covenant is broken by the priest-kings, the earth groans under the weight of that fracture. It cannot yield its strength to rebels in the way it would to righteous stewards.
That is so countercultural to the modern habit of treating environmental crises as merely technical problems rather than issues of worship or morality.
It really is. However, Velasquez makes a vital clarification here that prevents this from becoming pure nihilism.
Thank goodness. What is it?
The curse is real, but not ultimate.
Real, but not ultimate, meaning it's a temporary state of affairs?
Exactly. Judgment in this narrative always serves the purpose of eventual restoration. God's promise frames the curse.
So the thorns, the pain of childbirth, the sweat at the brow, these are real, agonizing consequences, but they point toward redemption.
Yes, God does not abandon the project.
Okay, to understand how this temporary curse actually gets resolved, we have to zoom way out.
Way out.
The sources include these incredible infographics that map out the grand, sweeping narrative arc of the entire Bible.
Yeah, they break the biblical timeline down into 14 distinct stages, going from eternity past all the way to eternity future.
Walking through this timeline gives so much context to how this cosmic fracture is eventually dealt with. Can you walk us through those stages?
Sure, the scope is massive. The 14 stages are presented chronologically to show the unfolding architecture of redemption.
Okay, what are they?
We have eternity, creation, fall, covenant, redemption, kingdom, exile, restoration, Messiah, church, judgment, millennium, new creation, and finally, eternity again.
That is a lot of ground to cover. Let's track how the narrative responds to the fall specifically. We start in eternity, where God exists in perfect fullness before anything is made.
Right, meaning the curse didn't surprise or panic him.
Then creation, the good ordered world, then the fall where rebellion brings the curse. But immediately after the fall, in stage 4, we hit covenant.
Yes.
The source highlights a specific verse, Genesis 3.15, right in the middle of God handing down these devastating curses. The author calls it the proto-evangelium.
The first gospel. Which is amazing because even as judgment is being pronounced on the serpent, the woman, and the man, God embeds a promise.
What's the promise?
He declares that a seed, or an offspring of the woman, will eventually crush the head of the serpent, though the serpent will strike his heel.
So hope enters the narrative at the exact moment of ruin.
Exactly. A human descendant will come to undo the work of the deceiver, though it will cost him dearly.
And from there, the concept of covenant really expands. God makes a promise to a single man, Abraham, in Genesis 12.
Right, and the promise isn't just that Abraham will have a nice local family.
It's a global cosmic promise. God says, in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed.
So the blessing that was lost to the Garden of Eden is guaranteed to return to the whole world through this specific family line.
The timeline then moves to redemption, which the Old Testament roots primarily in the Exodus, right?
Yes, God rescues the descendants of Abraham from slavery in Egypt. It demonstrates his power over the false gods and oppressive structures of human empires.
Then we move to kingdom, where God establishes Israel as a nation with specific laws centered around Mount Sinai.
And this is where the infographics highlight a fascinating dynamic regarding the curse.
Oh, about the land.
Yeah. The Mosaic Covenant, the law given to Israel, actually enlisted the physical creation into its legal structure.
I remember this from the text. The Old Testament witness heavily features the land itself acting as a barometer of the people's spiritual state.
Exactly. Deuteronomy 28 lays this out explicitly. If the people were obedient to God, they receive rain in its season, bountiful harvests, and peace from enemies.
The whole flowing with milk and honey thing.
Right, but if they rebelled and went after other gods, the heavens would become like bronze, the earth like iron.
They would face drought, famine, pestilence.
And ultimately, they would be vomited out of the land.
Which leads directly to stage 7 on our timeline, exile. When Israel continuously breaks the covenant, foreign empires sweep in and carry them away to Babylon.
Yes.
And the source calls the exile of Israel a national replay of Edenic loss. I just think that is such a profound way to phrase it.
It really is. They are kicked out of the promised land, just like Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden.
Alienation from God inherently produces alienation from place.
Because the physical environment is entirely dependent on the internal spiritual reality of the people.
Wow.
Exile is the ultimate manifestation of the curse in the Old Testament. And the New Testament witness, as seen in passages like Ephesians 2, expands this to describe all of humanity as being spiritually exiled.
Meaning we are dead in trespasses and sins, completely alienated from God.
Right. The history of Israel proved that simply having good laws and a good piece of land couldn't fix the fractured human heart.
I kind of liken this to a massive multi-season epic, like a TV show.
Oh, how so?
Well, we start with a perfect pilot episode in the garden. Everything goes horribly wrong in episode 3. And then the rest of the seasons, all these covenants, the Exodus, the kings, the prophets, the exiles, are this long, grueling journey trying to get back home.
Right, trying to get back to the garden, but they are constantly sabotaging themselves.
Exactly. And throughout those grueling eras, the Old Testament establishes a complex sacrificial system.
Centered around the tabernacle and later the temple. Yes. Velisis explains that this system was designed to teach a profound, visceral truth.
That sin requires atonement.
Yes. In this framework, blood isn't magic. It is a divinely appointed symbol that life is forfeited by sin, and that substitution is necessary for justice to be satisfied.
If you think about what a temple actually looked, sounded, and smelled like, it wasn't a quiet, sanitized, modern church.
Not at all. It was loud. It smelled like iron, blood, and roasting meat.
It was a constant, graphic reminder that rebellion causes death. An innocent animal bears the consequences of the guilty human.
Right. The worshiper places their hand on the animal's head, transferring their guilt, and the animal dies in their place.
But the text is clear that all those millions of sacrifices were just a temporary fix.
Yeah, the blood of bulls and goats could never actually take away human sin. They were placeholders.
Setting the stage for a final redeemer.
Exactly. Creating the theological vocabulary for what was to come.
Which brings us to the most critical juncture in this entire 14-stage timeline. This entire sweeping history of exiles and temporary sacrifices leads directly to a singular monumental turning point where the curse is finally confronted head-on.
Stage 9, the Messiah.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
This is the focal point of Velasis's entire theological architecture. Jesus Christ is introduced as the center of the narrative.
The one who resolves the tension of the previous 8 stages?
Right. The Gospels intentionally portray him in very specific, restorative terms.
How so?
Well, he is the true Israel who succeeds in the wilderness where the nation failed. He is the last Adam who obeys the Father where the first Adam rebelled.
And he is the promised seed from Genesis 3.15.
The one who has finally arrived to crush the serpent.
The climax of this entire cosmic curse happens at the cross. The source references Galatians 3.13, which is an incredibly intense verse.
Christ redeemed us from the curse of law by becoming a curse for us.
By becoming a curse, he doesn't just wave a magic wand and make the curse disappear, he absorbs it.
Yes. It is the ultimate paradox of the Christian narrative. The sinless Christ willfully enters the place of ultimate condemnation.
He absorbs the judicial consequence of the human rebellion.
And the theological logic operating here is representative and substitutionary redemption, which the author links heavily to Romans chapter 5.
But how does that actually work mechanically within this framework? Like, how does one person absorb a cosmic curse meant for billions of people and the Earth itself?
The argument in Romans 5 is based on federal headship.
Federal headship.
Right. Just as one man's disobedience, Adam acting as the representative head of humanity, brought condemnation, fracture, and the curse to the entire world.
Okay, I follow.
One man's obedience, Christ acting as the new representative head, brings justification and life.
It makes me think of like a corporate structure. If a CEO signs a disastrous contract, the whole company goes bankrupt.
Right.
But if a new CEO steps in and pays the debt out of his own immense personal wealth, the whole company is saved.
That's a solid analogy. Christ takes the legal penalty of the cosmic treason upon himself.
So he acts as the ultimate lightning rod. The storm of covenantal justice that was meant to strike the rebellious estate managers strikes him instead.
Exactly. But Velasquez argues that the cross is not merely about legal forgiveness or balancing a cosmic ledger.
What else is it?
It is an act of violent cosmic warfare.
Warfare.
Yeah. By absorbing the curse and dying, Christ breaks the very power of sin and death. The source quotes Colossians 2:15, stating that Christ disarmed the rulers and authorities at the cross.
Meaning he defeated the spiritual forces of rebellion that had held humanity captive since Genesis 3.
Exactly. And then the resurrection happened.
Right.
And the author makes a point here that is so crucial for understanding this specific worldview. The resurrection isn't presented just as a neat private miracle to prove Jesus was divine.
It isn't just a happy ending to a sad story.
No, the source calls it the first fruits of a renewed world. It is the hinge of human history.
If Genesis 3 was the day the curse began, Easter Sunday is the day its reversal was officially launched.
And the physical, material nature of the resurrection is paramount here. Jesus didn't rise as a ghostly, ethereal spirit.
Right. He rose with a physical, tangible body. He ate fish. People touched his scars.
Which proves that God is not abandoning the material creation. He is actively redeeming and renewing it from the inside out. Matter is not discarded, it is glorified.
Wait, I have to step in here and push back on this.
Okay, what's the hang-up?
If Easter is the beginning of the curse's reversal, and if the victory is completely won, the debt is paid, the rulers and authorities are disarmed, why does looking out the window right now still feel exactly like we were living in Genesis 3?
That is the million-dollar question.
I mean, we still have devastating wars, we still have terminal cancer, we still have earthquakes, and honestly, my garden is still full of weeds. If the lightning rod took the hit, why is the house still catching fire?
That is the central tension of the Christian experience. And it brings us to stage 10 of the timeline, the church.
Okay, how does the church fit into that tension?
The author explicitly addresses this gap between the victory won and the reality experienced. The theological concept here is called living in the already but not yet.
The already but not yet.
Right. The curse is defeated in principle, its root has been severed, but it has not yet been removed in full manifestation.
So we are living in the overlap of the ages. The new era has started, but the old era hasn't fully packed up its bags and left the building.
Precisely. Believers inhabit a world where the new creation has dawned in the resurrected Christ, but the old creation, subjected to the curse, has not yet passed away.
And to explain how we navigate this, the source dives deeply into Romans 8:19-22. Velasquez calls this one of the most important texts in the entire Bible for understanding the current state of the physical world.
It really is foundational.
Let's look at the actual mechanics of Romans 8 then. What is Paul saying about the physical dirt, animals, and ecosystems right now?
The passage states that the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God.
Eager longing.
Yes. It says creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of God who subjected it, in hope that creation itself will eventually be set free from its bondage to corruption.
And obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God.
Exactly. It concludes by saying that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now.
Groaning in the pains of childbirth. I mean, that is such a visceral metaphor for looking at a world full of decay, entropy, and natural disasters.
The author parses out the vital difference between terminal despair and what he calls pregnant hope.
Pregnant hope.
Right. A death rattle and a labor pain might sound similar to the untrained ear. They both involve agonizing, violent groans, but they signify two completely opposite realities.
One signals the absolute end of life.
And the other signals that new life is about to violently break forth into the world. The created order is not abandoned to rot in the grave. It is enduring the painful contractions that precede its final bodily renewal.
That reminds me of a medical diagnosis. Like, say a doctor administers a cure and it's guaranteed to work 100%. The disease is officially defeated at a cellular level in your body,
Right.
but the patient still has to endure a painful, exhausting physical recovery process over several months before actually returning to full health. You are definitively cured, but you are still hurting today.
You are in the already, but not yet. That perfectly captures the tension.
Wow.
And because of this pregnant hope, the church, the community of believers living in this overlap, is meant to act as a forecast of this coming renewal.
Which is why Velazquez argues Christians are called to engage deeply with the material world.
Exactly. They are called to farm the land, build a robust infrastructure, heal the sick, create beautiful art, and establish justice in their communities.
So they aren't supposed to just, sit in a bunker reading their Bibles, waiting to be beamed up to heaven while the earth burns.
No, not at all. They do these things not because they believe their own human efforts can permanently fix the world, and not because the world is disposable, but because the world belongs to the Lord and is destined for complete restoration.
Every act of healing or justice is a signpost pointing to the coming kingdom.
The physical world matters deeply to God, therefore it must matter deeply to his people.
Because we live in this agonizing but incredibly hopeful middle ground, the sources provide some very practical rules of engagement for everyday life.
And this is where it gets really applicable.
Yeah, I want to spend significant time here, because this is where lofty theology actually hits the pavement for you, the listener. If we adopt Velazquez's framework, how does knowing about this cosmic fracture and this pregnant hope change a random Tuesday morning?
Well, the author details several practical implications, starting with the baseline expectations of the Christian life. Understanding the curse means expecting trials.
It gives believers a robust vocabulary for frustration without collapsing into cynicism or nihilism.
Exactly. Having language for frustration without cynicism is so rare today. Usually people swing between toxic positivity or complete despair.
This framework offers a middle path. Pain is undeniably real, but it is temporary.
Right. When a believer experiences chronic illness, a failing business, a devastating miscarriage, or a profoundly broken relationship, they are not seeing evidence that God has failed them.
Or that the universe is just a meaningless void.
Exactly. They are simply experiencing the lingering residue of Genesis 3. It prevents the theological whiplash that happens when people are falsely taught that faith guarantees an easy, prosperous life.
The source speaks directly to ministry and leadership, too. It warns pastors and leaders not to trivialize the curse with shallow optimism.
Oh, definitely. You know, the type someone loses a loved one, and a well-meaning person just slaps a Bible verse on the tragedy and tells them God has a plan, so they should just smile.
Yeah, that helps
Yeah.
no one.
The text says leaders must learn to sit in the ashes with people and mourn. They must realize that all human systems, churches, governments, corporations are fragile. They are stained by the fall and require deep humility to navigate.
Furthermore, this framework fundamentally redefines how believers should view justice and compassion. The infographics emphasize that caring for the poor, protecting the vulnerable, and stewarding the earth are not liberal distractions from the quote-unquote real spiritual gospel.
Right. Rather, acts of mercy and justice are the necessary faithful responses to a wounded creation. They are tangible demonstrations of the character of the King who is returning to make all things new.
The author also outlines several common misunderstandings that people fall into when trying to make sense of the world's brokenness. The infographics list a few dangerous extremes.
What's the first one?
One is reducing the curse to just bad luck, like, oh, I got a flat tire, or the hurricane hit. The universe is just random.
Right, but the source says no. The curse is a specific theological reality tied to historical human rebellion.
And another massive misunderstanding is treating creation as disposable. The idea that the physical world is just a sinking ship, it's all going to burn anyway, so why bother polishing the brass or caring for the environment?
Velazquez is careful to point out the opposite error as well, maintaining a precise balance.
How so?
While we absolutely shouldn't treat the earth as disposable, we also cannot turn creation care or social activism into a substitute for the gospel of atonement.
So keeping the main thing the main thing.
Yes. The source maintains that any theology that seeks to save human souls for eternity while completely ignoring the physical suffering and fate of the material creation is simply too small. It ignores Genesis 1 and 2.
But conversely,
Any theology that focuses entirely on caring for the environment or achieving social equity while ignoring human sin The wrath of God and the necessity of the blood of Christ is also too small.
A robust biblical worldview requires both the judgment of sin and the physical renewal of the world. If you are leading a team at work and dealing with broken supply chains, or if you're dealing with a chronic, painful illness that doctors can't figure out, or if you are just totally overwhelmed by the relentless, heartbreaking negativity of the daily news cycle, looking through this lens shifts everything.
It really reframes your entire daily reality.
If we follow Velasquez's logic, your exhaustion and your grief aren't evidence that we are just floating on a meaningless rock in a cold universe. It's evidence that you were made for a world that doesn't exist yet.
Beautifully put.
But looking at this source material, how do we actually balance the expectation of this ultimate full restoration with the gritty daily reality that we just aren't there yet? How do we live in that tension without going crazy?
According to the source, the balance is maintained through active, patient endurance. We are instructed to pursue personal holiness in the midst of a corrupt world.
We must serve our communities and care for the earth as faithful, deputized stewards.
And we must pray with a deep daily dependence on God. Believers are called to hold fast to the promise of coming glory without demanding or expecting a perfect utopia here and now through human, political, or technological effort.
We work for justice, knowing that only Christ's return will finally, permanently achieve it.
Exactly.
And that endurance is only possible because, according to this 14-stage narrative, the believers know exactly how the story is guaranteed to end. Let's look at those final stages, the final hope.
The grand narrative moves through the final stages: judgment, the millennium, new creation, and eternity.
Right.
And the author makes a very important countercultural point about judgment.
Oh, this is a big one.
Yeah, in modern culture, the idea of divine judgment is often viewed as cruel, archaic, or vindictive. But Velasquez argues that judgment is actually a necessary, beautiful foundation for hope.
I mean, how is a day of wrath and judgment hopeful? That sounds terrifying to most people.
It is hopeful because evil must be decisively removed for true justice and peace to be established.
A world where systemic sin, exploitation, child abuse, and murder are simply swept under the rug or ignored can never become a world where righteousness and peace dwell safely.
Exactly. God will not leave the curse unanswered. The moral order of the universe must be vindicated. God must permanently exile evil so that the restored garden can be safe.
You can't have a perfectly restored, multi-million-dollar mansion if you leave the termites in the walls because you feel bad for them.
That's a perfect analogy.
You have to eradicate the rot before you can enjoy the restoration. The judgment is the eradication of the cosmic termites.
And that leads to the final beautiful picture painted in Revelation chapters 21 and 22, the new heavens and the new earth.
This is where the grand narrative comes full circle. The infographics draw a direct, intentional contrast between the beginning of the Bible and the end.
Right. In Genesis 3.1 scene, the tragic decree was, "Cursed is the ground because of you."
But in Revelation 22.3, the triumphant declaration is, "No longer will there be anything accursed."
The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship him. It is the direct, absolute, cosmic reversal of the fall.
So the end of the story is not humans abandoning the physical earth to go float on ethereal clouds, playing harps as disembodied spirits forever.
Not at all. And that's a huge misconception. The source explicitly states that the biblical story does not end with souls escaping matter. It ends with creation perfected.
It is a bodily, communal, historical, and cosmic hope.
The text describes a new earth with a physical river of the water of life, a physical tree of life yielding fruit every month for the healing of the nations.
And the direct, unfiltered presence of God dwelling with humanity on a renewed earth. Heaven literally comes down to earth.
Exactly.
I'm just reflecting on the incredible symmetry of this entire narrative. The story begins in a pristine, beautiful garden, but it ends in a thriving, bustling garden city.
What was lost in Adam isn't just handed back exactly as it was. It's not just a reset to zero.
It's surpassed in Christ. Humanity moves from this untested, fragile innocence in Genesis, which was easily shattered by temptation, to a glorified, permanent, unbreakable communion in Revelation.
That is the ultimate summary of the author's thesis right there. The curse upon creation, with all its pain, thorns, exhausting labor, and frustration, is ultimately a temporary condition in the larger, eternal arc of God's purpose.
It operates as a severe mercy.
Yes. It prevents humanity from being content in a fallen state, pointing them instead toward their desperate need for the Redeemer. Ultimately, the curse will be entirely forgotten, and only the life of the Lamb and the joy of a fully renewed creation will remain.
Thank you so much for helping us navigate this immense, profound theological landscape today. We've gone from the tragic cosmic fracture of human rebellion through the grueling history of Israel's covenants and exiles, to the mechanics of the curse-bearing king on the cross, all the way to the guaranteed bodily restoration of the entire universe.
It's a massive journey.
It really is. Regardless of where you stand personally on these texts, it is a staggering, architecturally brilliant way to view the world.
It is a framework that offers both profound, unblinking realism about the darkness and decay of the present moment,
Hmm.
alongside an unshakable, guaranteed hope for the future of the cosmos.
As we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. We talked at the very beginning about walking through a beautiful but structurally broken mansion.
Right, the estate analogy.
The next time you experience the friction of this broken world, whether it is a piece of vital technology breaking down when you need it most, a stubborn weed choking the life out of your backyard garden, or a deeply painful, fractured misunderstanding with a friend, what if you applied this framework?
What if, instead of defaulting to sudden anger or cynical despair, you view that exact moment of frustration as an echo of Genesis 3?
What if you recognized it as the creation groaning in childbirth? And more importantly, how might recognizing that specific groan immediately point you toward the pregnant hope of the coming garden city, where the curse is finally permanently lifted? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring the profound depths of the sources around you, and we will see you next time.